trying to act out of what is right for me, even if it is, and this is the hardest part for me, even if it means that it's not so nice to the other person. That's where I struggle. If I feel like it's messed up to the other person, I'm like, well, I should just suck it up. You're not honoring yourself when you do that. You're not being true to yourself when you do that, when you prioritize somebody else's feelings over your own.
Hey everybody, welcome to It Takes a Village. I'm your host, Delina Medhin, and this is the most personal I have ever been. It Takes a Village is a time capsule collection. 10 intimate episodes where I share with you the people that have guided almost every business decision I've made. In 2008, I began my career as a makeup artist, taking on clients in the evenings and weekends, trying to fit it around my 9-to-5 job. And in 2015, I made the I wish it was hard, but I was tired of working for somebody else decision to quit that corporate job, that corporate six-figure job, and fully commit to being a self-employed entrepreneur. That's where the roller coaster of finances, belief in myself, and how much I was willing to endure for my dream was really put to the test. When we see social media, we always look at the end result. But this collection is a deep dive into the process. To my aspiring entrepreneurs, this is my open love letter to you. The most important thing I did was to get around like-minded people. People who believe in themselves have the ability to inspire you to believe more in yourself. My dream for you is to develop an unshakable belief in your own ability to win and to identify your own personal village so you can become. Let's get into it.
So I'm excited to have you here, Heran. You're my sister and my first friend in life. And
First ever.
First ever, but we are like absolutely could not be any more opposite than each other, which is so funny. So I feel like this is a really good conversation for us to have because, well, I spent a lot of time talking with Mom. And when I talked with Mom, I was talking about kind of the struggle to get her to really believe in what I was doing as a makeup artist.
Yeah.
And there's no one who knows that more than you, because like I told you, and like, no matter how you felt, which I do want to dive into how you actually felt, but no matter how you felt, you always really conveyed like, it doesn't even matter. Like, don't even worry about that. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. But you were very you were very encouraging from the very beginning of me deciding to become a makeup artist. And even as I continue to tell you other things I'm working on, you always are encouraging. And I've always known how important that was to me. But for a long time, you were the only person that believed in what I was doing. And I do believe that even right now that I wouldn't be where I'm at if, I didn't have the encouragement from you. So I just wanted to say thank you. And
Thanks, Dee.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk to you about kind of like growing up and entrepreneurship and our thoughts on entrepreneurship as kids. Like, what were your thoughts on it? Because I feel like it was always in the mix and a conversation between us.
That's such an interesting question because I think a part of me has always wanted to be an entrepreneur and to have kind of entrepreneurial like efforts, not necessarily that I would, create a business and do everything to build my life around that business. But, I've always had ideas about doing one-off sort of things that I think would be fun and could also make some money. Like, for example, like some of the like designs that I've been drawing and had in my head for years that I haven't quite gotten around to. Right. But the way that I remember growing up is that stability was so prioritized for us and for our family. And I think it was mainly from, Mom and Dad obviously came from a very unstable place. They came from Eritrea and, they both left when it was, both left Eritrea and Ethiopia because I think they both left from what was Addis at the time, or what is Addis, not Addis at the time. And they both left from Addis and then, emigrated to the US somehow, some way got here through a longer journey. So that had to be really hard for them, right? And I know that dad has some kind of history with our uncle and our granddad who had businesses that they struggled as entrepreneurs, right? As a lot of entrepreneurs do. And my thought or my recollection around us growing up was always like, just put your head down, go to school, do the work, get A's, and then go graduate in whatever sort of medical degree, because that was really it. And then slowly it started changing. Go graduate in one of those two degrees and then, go work. That was it. So I always felt like there was no room for entrepreneurship in the way that our parents had planned our lives.
Okay. So you touched on stability, which I want to dive a little deeper into, because when I was speaking with mom, that was something that came up constantly, was stability. And I feel like, yeah, because, she admitted to craving stability in her own life. And I mean, and I think that's where her and dad, their relationship really like made sense in terms of core values. But when we talk about stability, because I feel like it's definitely a pull for me and for you, I think more so me now, but I feel like we're almost swapping in a way. Like I'm seeing you kind of push the stability a little bit, and I'm seeing myself kind of settle into more of a stability kind of, or a stable place, true. Which is so interesting. So it's almost like a swap in terms of life. It's not that I'm not risk taking, but are there any points in time where you can see where you really pushed stability as a kid, or with our relationship where you really pushed it? Or do you think that you were just straight and narrow with your stability, or you're like in prioritizing stability?
I mean, I think I've always prioritized stability. I think that's always been, I don't know enough about this, and I'm going to speak a little bit out of like context, but like I know that it's part of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like, what is like the baseline level of things that you need? And for me, stability was always like, or has always been something that I'm very, very, it's very much a part of the way that I see my life and the way that I see the world. And I think what has happened, over the past few years is that I've gotten to a place where I've saved up enough money to buy a house. And I think getting to this point has always in my mind been like, okay, this is the turning point. Like getting to buy my first property, my first house has always been like, okay, I just need to get there. Like, it's not like everything's going to be solved once I get there, but this is a huge goal. It takes years and years and years to save up, or at least it took me years to save up for, a down payment for a house. And, there will be more expenses that come with buying a house, but this is where I feel more comfortable to depart, right? Because one of the biggest, I'm just super practical in this way. One of the biggest expenses anybody has is their housing expenses, right? And right now I live in the Bay Area. I pay, quite a lot of money for me to live in an apartment that is a shared apartment with my roommate. And I could not afford a house out here, realistically. And so part of me feeling like I have some more room to be flexible and to grow and to say that I'm willing to be more unstable is buying this house, right? Because if I can say that I have another source of income, coming in from renting out part of the house, then that's an ability for me to say, okay, well then maybe I have more flexibility in, where I'm going or what I'm doing, because I don't have to worry about my housing expenses as much, right? And then I can play around with the money that I'm getting from work.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're expanding definitely into this place of being like, okay, I'm going to start making investments. And I'm really proud of you for doing this, because we have been talking about this for years. But similarly, in terms of me, like you encouraged me in makeup and I was encouraging you in real estate, like even in terms of like, oh, okay, I'm going to purchase this house. And it was just simple conversations. It wasn't like, oh, if you don't do this right now, it's not the right time. It was more of the advice of, they're different industries. I know that when you're looking to do something new, you always want to try and find an expert in it. And so those kind of lessons that I learned, I feel like we've traded along the way in terms of if you have an expert, you'll hopefully make less mistakes. You'll make mistakes because that's life.
Yeah.
But, the goal is to find a coach or somebody who can kind of help you through that. But before we even get into that, because I definitely want to go kind of back in time. And I know that you remember this. You remember when we had our, you know what I'm about to say, I think. You remember when we had our guest at our house? I won't even say his name, but or maybe I should say his name, but he came over and he was like, well, what do you want to do? And this was around the time that you were going to law school. And he goes, okay, well, what do you want to do? And he looked at me and I go, oh, I'm going to be a makeup artist. And he laughed so hard. Do you remember him?
I don't remember him laughing, but I remember him wholly dismissing that you wanted to be a makeup artist.
It was, I remember him tell you.
Yeah.
And he was an elder. So it's like, I can't say anything, right? Like, it's like, not like I'm just going to be like, okay. But me, little Delina was stewing. Like, I was mad. So I left and I went over and because he wasn't a relative, but he was definitely somebody who, dad and mom respected a lot and had over for dinner. So it was like, we come over to the corner and I was like, he said that it doesn't matter. And you're like, who is he? Who cares? And I remember being like, what? And you were like, nobody cares about this guy. Like that he's like saying that this doesn't matter.
Well, you also had very different plans, right? Like him saying that about somebody who wants to be an artist and an entrepreneur is like, okay, that's like the exact opposite of what he does for a living, right? Me, as somebody who was like, oh, I'm going to law school, I'm going to be a lawyer. It was like, of course he's going to be like, check, great job, perfect, because it's like almost a validation of his own choices.
Right. No, you're right. But it's funny as a younger girl, like, I'm like 16, 17, 18. I can't remember how old I was, but we were both in our teens, late teens. And I remember being like, what? Like, who is this man? But you having my back at that moment was like so important because I didn't even like the fact that I still remember a conversation that we had at the dinner table, like more than 15 years ago. And then me walking away and being sad. Like I remember sitting on the stairs and you being like, it doesn't even matter. He doesn't matter. And that same year, I think you also bought me a train case, which I still have, a Dior show mascara and a Sephora white eyeliner. And you were like, hey, I believe in your dream. And I was like, you know what I mean? Because the thing is like, you don't know the things that you do in life that make an impact in other people. But if I think what I've realized is that having somebody believe in your dream, I was lucky enough for it to be you. Some people don't have family that are interested in, supporting. Some people have a best friend. Some people just have somebody that they know at work. You know what I mean? But like having someone to encourage you, especially for somebody like me, who's not a person who's driven by negativity. I'm driven by, encouragement, and I'm driven by positive reinforcement, which I think you and I are very similar in that way. I think you're probably more sensitive to negative feedback than I am even now at this point, but we've both been, and we both are, I think, like people who are just like pretty sensitive in terms of like.
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. And it might come from the fact that we have very opinionated parents.
Opinionated is an understatement.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm really harping on this, but it really did take a long time for mom and dad to really like be cool with what I'm doing. And that was tough.
Yeah. I can see that for sure. I'm basically just getting into that now, right? Where I'm just starting out in an alternative sort of path, and I'm staying at my job. I haven't quit my job. I haven't done anything, there's no change to my income, but I'm making a challenging, kind of scary choice to buy a place that needs a lot of, construction work, needs a lot of renovation. And I've never done anything like this before. And, the response I initially got from mom and dad about the specific house that I wanted to look at was not what I expected. Right. And that sucked. Right. I don't know if I called you immediately, but we talked about it. Right. Like, I was super excited. I was like, oh, this location is near where I think, will be super easy to rent, and like was very excited about it. And it was like, popping a balloon with a pin. It was like the response was like, this is dumb. Like this is such a wild idea. the house is expensive, right? It's in a desirable, location, and the house is expensive. So
Yeah.
it's, it's, I get it. I know that they don't want me to make a decision that I will regret. And that's where their feedback comes from. But it's really hard for me to respond well in those sorts of situations, because all I hear is your dream is dumb. And, it's like all I hear is like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you think you could do this? That's what I hear. And that's not nice to hear. And, especially from family, but it's really discouraging to hear. Especially when, you come into it and you're like super excited and you're thinking that like this is going to be the start of a whole thing. I mean, like I explained to you earlier, it's, me talking about, creating another source of income for myself in terms of rental. And so this is like super exciting to me that I've been talking about for years. So yeah. I do remember that conversation that you're referring to with that person. And I don't even think it makes sense to call them out. But I think even in that moment, I think our culture, and I don't want to blame it on our culture, but I think our culture can be so risk averse at times, or at least our parents' generation from the culture is just doesn't really reward taking risks in a way. And there's so much hardship that they were like, this is why they came here, so they didn't have to struggle, right? We do have family members that are back home that have continued to have to struggle, since our parents left. And it's really sad. It's really, and I get it. I totally get it. And I try to remind myself in those moments where they, shit on my dream. I try to remind myself like, this isn't them just shitting on my dream because they're not, they want to shit on my dream and they're not good people. They're shitting on my dream because this is what they know and this is what they're comfortable with. So I try really hard. I'm not always there, but I try really hard to give them grace for that situation, because it makes it easier for me too, if I can get there in my head.
I like that we're talking about this. Actually, I love that we're talking about this, because I think this is a really important conversation, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're buying your first house, which congratulations, by the way, I'm so proud of you for doing that. And the amount of time you actually took to research, we've been talking about this for 10 years, maybe more.
Yeah.
Of you doing this.
Probably.
And so it wasn't an overnight decision, even though sometimes when you pull the switch or you flip the light on, like people are like, oh my gosh, wow, like you doing this, and it's like, nah, I've been sowing seeds on this one for a while. You know what I mean? I've been planting seeds on this. Yeah. So in terms of risk, I feel like you're definitely more risk averse than me. So I know that if you decided to do this, it's because you like checked all the stuff. You're very, I might not have all the ducks in a row, but I just might get excited about an idea and just go with it. While you are very much like, okay, A, B, C, D. And I think that, and I like that we're having this conversation because we're so different, and yet we're still both doing something that scares us, or that, intimidates us. One of the things I want to tap into here is, you allowed me to have that person and that confidant in terms of sharing what I was doing. But I also even recently shared with you to protect your dream, right? People don't talk about that as much. Like we're told, especially in this, we're in the season of manifest your dreams, speak your dreams into reality, tell people what you want. You know what I mean? So there's this, but people don't talk about the fact that I feel personally that it's best to hold on to your dream, put some energy and some effort into it, get to a place where you feel comfortable and strong, then share your dream. You can manifest quietly too. You don't have to manifest, with a loudspeaker or like because sometimes you're not strong enough yet to hear somebody else tell you like, what? Like, you remember when I was in college and I told you that this girl, I told her I wanted to be a makeup artist, because this happened consistently. So I feel like I called you every time.
Oh shit, you got all the stories.
Okay.
What's this?
Beep, beep. This is me backing up.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So. Oh, that's good. That's the sound I should have used. Okay. So, but There was a girl in college who came up and she goes, we're getting ready. And she's supposed to be my friend. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a makeup artist. And she's like, oh, really? She's like, why don't you do my makeup? What? Like, it was
You
just like,
paying?
right. Excuse me. Let me go ahead and send you my invoice. Yeah. So
Here's my fee.
here's my fee. You know what I mean? So I remember being like, I get hot. And do you get hot and sweaty when you get nervous? I get immediately hot.
Yeah.
So I wasn't ready to say anything yet. So when she said that to me, I clammed up. I was like, because I didn't have any brushes. I didn't
have. You probably just had that swimming eyeshadow from MAC. That's it. Just that one. You're probably rubbing your finger in it and just do.
I was like, makeup
artist, across the lid.
Literally. So I feel, I was vulnerable at that moment. So,
yeah.
And she wasn't, like you, where you were like, you can do it.
No.
So, I'm sharing that because I think, like, in terms of protecting your dream, right? Like, you've been very careful in terms of who you've been sharing what you're doing right now. You're kind of at the beginning stages of this. Like, yeah, you've been planning for a while, but you have shared it with very few select people about, you know what I mean? Turning this into, because it's not only in a home, it's also an investment property. So you bought it with the intention of flipping it in terms of like renting. So
yeah.
That's a very different intentionality that I also mentioned, like, our parents obviously don't have any, rental properties or investment properties in that way in terms of houses. So that we know of anyway. So I feel, you know what I mean? Who knows?
Back home, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Maybe, who knows? But that's why I was saying when it came to advice, and this is not to slight them in any way, I said, do not ask advice from someone who is not doing what you want to do. And that's something I had to learn along the way too, because everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone has something that they want to tell you. Oh, have you thought about this? Have never done what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So
even the people who have done things in that industry will always have an opinion though. Right. And I think the important thing to filter out is like, who has done something you want to do and like their values align with yours and you trust them. Right. That's important because you can get all kinds of pulled in different directions, especially in, makeup and especially in real estate. There's a bunch of people out there that just want to take advantage of you or just don't want to pay you for your services or, like there was at least, I'm going to say this, so you don't have to say it. There was at least one time where we had a conversation and somebody whose makeup that you did, and you weren't focused on the financials of it, so you didn't, you weren't bothered. You were just like, my rate is my rate. Come to the end of the service, and then they had a problem once you presented them with your rate, and it's like, well, hold on, you came to me and you said, just send me your invoice. It's cool. You can't do that unless you're comfortable with paying whatever the invoice is when it comes through.
If you got it, okay. I
mean, if you don't know what to expect, then don't approach it in that way, right? And I guess this is a little bit of a detour, but it's just a matter of like aligning yourself with people whose values you agree with and who appreciate you, because you could have just as easily gone into that situation and been like, oh, okay, cool. This is my rate because this is what this person can afford. And it's not like, you didn't compromise who you were. You were like, this is my rate. You not asking the questions up front, that doesn't mean I'm not worth the rate that I would charge elsewhere. Right. And I think it's the more I'm trying to work my way through this process of real estate, the more I'm trying to make sure that I've found people. And I'm looking for people who have similar values, not just are in the place that I want to get to. Because you can get there, if you're shady, I could probably be a millionaire in real estate in the next 5 years if I want to, if I, play a game that I don't feel comfortable playing, right? But that's not, no part of me wants it just for the money. That's not why I'm doing this.
I mean, I like that because it doesn't mean that you don't want to make money and you don't want to make a lot of money. It just means that you have the ability to be able to discern between someone being led by money and somebody being led by passion. And you and I are similar in core values in that way, like in terms of everyone on my team and in my community of people that I work with, it's all about, hey, what are you led by? Are you led by passion or are you led by money? And people will show you that. You don't even have to ask that direct question, but people will show you that as you continue to work with them. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the heart behind the message, behind what you're trying to teach me, or behind what you're trying to tell me or share with me. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, when you create a heart-centered business, when you create a business that is driven based on you and your core values and who you are, you don't get shaken as much, especially once you start to establish the foundation. And although I've been doing this now for 12 years, like, I feel like I am just now really getting a stable foundation for my business. Like, I feel like now I feel comfortable enough to refer to myself as an expert, which I did not for many, many, many years. Like, I started doing makeup for what year was that? 2007, 2008. And it's 2021. How many years is that? 15, almost 15 years. And it took me here and legit till this year before I was like, okay, I feel like I'm an expert. And the crazy thing about that is, there are people who started yesterday that are calling themselves an expert.
Yep. And I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I'm saying that is because I do think the term expert should be earned. I'm going to say that, just point blank period. I do think that, but I do think it's important that we do have to get to a place where we trust ourselves enough to say, I can still be an expert and not know everything. Because I still need to phone a friend. You know, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? They'd be like, I'd like to phone a friend. Yeah. Like, you want to do that because if you don't, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You don't know everything. Yeah. I don't know everything. Yeah. You know, I was on an Insta Live yesterday with a good friend, and she was doing makeup, and I'm watching her probably just like how everybody else is watching her. She was showing me, funny enough, I'd never applied bottom lashes before on myself. Never. Till yesterday. And she was doing it, and she goes, oh, this is what you need. You know what I mean? And I go, well, let me watch you. And I openly admitted that I didn't know how to do it, instead of pretending that I did. And I feel like that vulnerability is strength in terms of you now. And I feel like you probably found that. I don't know if you found that in real estate too, where you're like, okay, I don't know how to do this. Let me start talking to people as if I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And integrity too. I think it's vulnerability and integrity. Like, if you're the kind of person who is open and willing to learn and is committed to your integrity in that way, you're not going to just sit here and BS like, oh yeah, let me just stick these little pieces of I don't know what eyelashes are made out of, but stick these things on my eyelashes. And then you look crazy because you don't know what you're doing. You missed an opportunity to learn from somebody who does know what they're doing, all for the sake of your ego, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I think there's certainly situations when you, as a makeup artist, could have, passed on or given up on deals for the sake of saying nope, this isn't for me. This isn't what I do. Nope, I'm good. Same thing with real estate, right? There's plenty of houses that you could make a lot of money off of, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I know how to fully renovate a 1928 house like that. What do I look like trying to do that? That's a waste of time. That's a waste of money, me doing that on my own, right? To a certain extent, you have to believe in yourself, and you have to say, I got this, but you also have to have enough humility to say, I need help. I don't know how to do this. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest breakthroughs for me in the last, 5 years or so. I don't actually know when I read this book, but I read a book called Mindset. And I can't think of I think it's the Psychology of Success, I think is the subtitle. But it's by a woman named Carol Dweck. And that book, there are a few books that I can say for sure in terms of my self-development, self-improvement that have changed my life. That book 100% changed my life, because it helped me to come to the understanding that you can have either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, right? And it doesn't have to be the same across everything in your life. You can have a fixed mindset about athletic ability, but you can have a growth mindset about intelligence, right? And that would mean that you believe that, I'm 5'5". I run this fast. Like, that's it. It's going to be me the rest of my life. Like, maybe it'll go up or down a few points, but like, I can't really improve my athletic ability. That would be a fixed mindset. Now, if you have a growth mindset about something like intelligence, then you're going to say, okay, if I don't know this, I should go learn it. I should go figure it out. There is a possibility that I can become smarter in this area, right? And so that mindset requires you to be vulnerable. It requires you to say to yourself, I don't know everything. There's a possibility that I will never know everything, likelihood, right? And in this one specific area that I'm really excited about, but I can try. I can try and get better. I can try and learn more about this by asking people who know, by reading, all that. And I think that was a huge breakthrough for me in terms of applying growth mindset to more areas of my life. I'd never heard of it described that way.
I like what you're saying for a lot of reasons. I mean, you touched on integrity, humility. Like, both of those are very, very important values, especially humility. I remember when you were reading that book, Mindset, because you texted me, I think, and you were like, Delina, I realized like one of the reasons why you're doing well is because you have a growth mindset about this. And I was like, oh, like, you should read this book, which I haven't yet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna get the book. But
look, it's a great book, but if you're understanding and applying all of that already, then you're further along, anyway.
But sometimes understanding something and operating in a space, but not necessarily understanding the psychology of why you do what you do is different. And I'm going to add a book to that as well, which is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. And I talk about this book all the time. Have you read this book?
No, this is the one. This is like my mindset. Like, you told me about it. I've been meaning to read it. I haven't done it yet. Yeah.
It is one of my favorite books for a lot of reasons. And it doesn't necessarily talk about specifically like naming it like growth mindset or fixed mindset. But what it does talk about is, how do you talk to yourself? Are you kind to yourself? We are a lot of times more kind to the people around us than we are to ourselves. Yeah. And this is something that you and I have talked about privately a lot, which is, what are we saying to ourselves? Are we being kind? And also, are we being authentic to what we want and what we need? Yeah. Like a couple months ago, you and I had a conversation about authenticity. I feel like one of the things that you and I have had to overcome in our own relationship is about authenticity and about obligation.
Yeah.
Because I think that culturally we were brought up to be obligated to each other, right? Like, as sisters, we are supposed to do this. We're supposed to do that. And sometimes we don't want to do those things, right?
Yeah.
And so when you do things out of obligation, you create resentment. And resentment is not a healthy feeling in a positive and healthy relationship. So you and I were at our breaking point, I think, earlier late last year. And, that was a very intense moment for us as sisters, because we've had like little fights like, hey, you playing? Why you playing? Like, but that was like a real thing because, we were in the middle of this pandemic. There was so much going on in terms of want, in terms of need for both of us, emotionally, physically, mentally, so many different things. And we get together and we realize like, oh my gosh, even though we know what we need, we're still operating out of obligation, both of us. Right. And so it was just like combustible. It was like we needed to take some time apart to reprioritize ourselves.
Yeah.
Because growth is important. And I feel like, I don't know if you want to expand on this too, but for me, that was a very important moment in terms of our relationship, because I feel like when we came back together, it was us telling each other, I'm going to now start to prioritize myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you were like, I'm going to start to prioritize myself, and we're still going to be good to each other regardless. I wanted to bring that up because I think that like, the relationship between sisters a lot of times is very like, I think we have one of the best relationships. If I look at everyone, everyone around us, not to say that there's like an award to win, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like we've rocked with each other for a long time. Like I know people who don't talk to their siblings, you know what I mean? Like legit,
That's tough. Cause I think, there's always going to be challenges when you have very different personalities, right? Mm-hmm. Like you and I are very different about a lot of things in our lives. And I think there are a lot of times, as you pointed out, when we move out of obligation instead of moving out of like true intention. You know what I mean? And it's hard, man, because I think especially for me is that's so ingrained in me. Like, this is your sister, this is your older sister. You're supposed to do the things that, you're told, or, you're supposed to do these things. And it's like, sometimes it's hard to feel like, especially in the pandemic, you don't have control over anything, right? Like, there's very few things that I feel like I've had control over in the past year. And not to say that I wasn't able to make a lot of progress in things that mattered to me, but you feel like you don't have control over a lot of things, especially in the past year. And then put on top of that, it's like, the extra anxiety of, or maybe not anxiety, the extra layer of just like, I'm a people pleaser to some extent, right? And it's like, okay, somebody asked me to do something, I should do it. And that's something I'm really working on, is trying to act out of what is right for me, even if it is, and this is the hardest part for me, even if it means that it's not so nice to the other person. That's where I struggle. If I feel like it's messed up to the other person, I'm like, well, I should just suck it up. You're not honoring yourself when you do that. You're not being true to yourself when you do that, when you prioritize somebody else's feelings over your own. And it's really hard for me to do. It's really hard because in some cases it's like, oh, like it'll be all right. It's no big deal. But, and I can't, there's still some work that I'm doing to figure out what those things are that I need to actually, kind of tease out for myself. So, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you so much for coming. This is like such a full conversation because I feel like we talked about our relationship as younger women, younger girls, and then our moving through college life and like our friendship now. And it has matured and is definitely one of, the highlights of my life that we are the friends that we are. So I'm happy that you feel I've supported you because I definitely know that you supported me. So thank you. I love you. And yeah.
Love you too.
Thanks for coming. Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Dee, for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to It Takes a Village. Be sure to check out the show notes for more details on how to follow and connect with Heran. It Takes a Village was produced by Tanny Productions. The team includes Britt Robbins, Delisha Dixon, and Maria Verhel de Jos. Our theme music is by B. Nick. If you like this conversation, subscribe right now so you don't miss our next episode coming to you very soon. Follow us on Instagram at Delina Medhin Presents, where you'll see and hear more clips from the podcast that didn't make it into the episode. And follow me at Delina Medhin. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.